Welcome to For the Record with Greenwood Law.
Welcome to For the Record with Greenwood Law with attorney Dylan W. Greenwood, founder of Greenwood Law in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Dylan is a criminal defense attorney representing clients in both state and federal court, known for his high-level personalized representation and hands-on approach to every case. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about white-collar crimes in North Carolina, cases built on financial records, digital trails, and long-running investigations that often look very different from traditional criminal charges. Dylan, sir, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So Dylan, white-collar cases usually start quietly and develop over months, even years. What are the earliest signs that someone may be under investigation for a financial offense?
So I think probably the best answer to that question is to divide it between what I've seen a lot of times with state investigations versus federal ones. A lot of times with federal investigations, maybe somebody's getting a letter, a target letter saying that they're under investigation because the feds do that. State North Carolina doesn't really do that as much, but that's a standard course. That's a procedure within the federal investigation. Also, too, accounts might get frozen. So that's another big indicator that something might be happening. When it comes to state charges, what I've seen more often than not, because a lot of those are like the embezzlement style charge versus like federal, usually involves like a lot of bank and wire fraud. So with state charges where you have a lot of embezzlement or obtaining property by false pretenses or something like that, that's more white collar in nature. A lot of times, because it's related to somebody's job, they're getting brought in by HR or an owner or manager or something, and they're being asked questions of like, can you explain this discrepancy? How is this occurring this way? And then, it depends on the level of sophistication of your employer as to whether or not that stuff is recorded, who all's involved in that meeting and everything else. But sometimes that can culminate into you being fired from the job. And usually that's a pretty big indicator that something is going on and that you probably need to start getting some help.
You kind of talked about it, but embezzlement and fraud are broad categories. When you first review a case, what helps you distinguish between a misunderstanding, a civil dispute, and a criminal allegation?
Sure. So sometimes it can just be an accounting error. I mean, really, and it looks a certain way, but it can then be explained because when you ultimately follow the money, it just is not an embezzlement, for instance, or it's not some fraudulent activity. I've also seen false accusations of fraud before as a retaliatory measure, that, people get mad at you and then they allege fraud. And usually on those, we're able to discern, what is and isn't going on. The way I've seen fraud actually carried out more often in North Carolina as a charge versus embezzlement is actually through insurance. I would say that's the most common form of fraud I run into. And I will give a lot of credit to the North Carolina Insurance Bureau. Their investigative team is quite thorough. They really, when I say that following the money, they follow it. And I have usually the discovery that comes in one of those cases is very thick and a lot of records to, again, follow that money trail.
These cases often hinge on, documentation rather than those eyewitness accounts. What types of records or data tend to carry the most weight in financial investigations?
So, yeah, I mean, it can be obviously bank records, any type of official accounting record. Especially if it is with a financial institution, I think that there's sort of a built-in level of authentication or authority that goes along with those if it's tied to like a bank, a credit union, a credit card company, whatever else. Not to say that those companies can't make mistakes, but there's a certain level of institutional support there that gives those extra level of credibility. We also run into personal accounting records. So usually every business, so many businesses use some form of like a QuickBooks style accounting software to keep track of their stuff. Every now and then you run to like the mom and pop thing that's like on a hand ledger or on one Excel spreadsheet or, a Google Doc or something like that. But more often than not, you've got, a QuickBooks style thing. That has a different level of weight because that ultimately is controlled by a company. And not every company has the best, accounting practices. And so even still, that is, it's based off of a human and there's human error involved. And that can certainly lead to misunderstandings. The other thing that we look at are personal records. So whether it be personal credit card or banking records, again, following that money to try to figure out where it went or whether or not there was some authorization for it to go somewhere, whatever that might look like. And so really it is just so records driven.
Is there a past case where a closer look at a financial, paperwork revealed a very different picture than was initially alleged?
Usually that pans out in the amount involved in my experience. I'm not here to say that every single one of these cases is like some sort of for sure guilty. Yeah, that is not the case. We've definitely had these cases where ultimately we've been able to explain something, but typically in those cases the explanation is able to happen early enough along in the process that everybody's like, oh yeah, okay, we see what was happening here. Sorry, we're good. Now, it might have scorched the earth as far as like an employee-employer relationship or something to that degree, but everything's been explained and either criminal charges get dismissed or criminal charges never manifest. Because we do it at the investigative stage as well as, once people get charged with something. The area I've seen this actually play out the most is in the amount. And so like one time I was involved in a federal case that not every white collar case is truly white collar. So this was actually like a obtaining property by false pretenses / theft / fraud kind of case involving baby formula.
Whoa.
Because especially different parts of the country, baby formula is expensive.
Yeah.
But baby formula, like elsewhere in the country, is more expensive than it is here in the South. And basically this was getting collected up here via theft ring, and then it was being moved on the black market to other parts of the country and then sold at a higher margin of profit in those stores because they were getting this on the black market and not paying as much as they would wholesale. And so the level of restitution in this case was like estimated around 6 million, which was really driving what the potential punishment or outcome was in the case. And I mean, there was no doubt that there was guilt here. Everybody was on camera. Like, it was a very thorough investigation. Ended up doing the loss calculation on it. It actually ended up being more like 2 million or less. And that saved years on a potential punishment, getting that amount of restitution down. So, again, sometimes it isn't about guilt or innocence. Sometimes it's about, figuring out saving somebody years in prison because maybe a loss calculation has ballooned out of control because, it wasn't really accounted for or somebody didn't know how to count. Not every lawyer is good at math. So, in fact, most aren't. But yeah, sometimes you just got to get in there and figure out what it is.
So federal agencies like, the FBI, IRS, Secret Service sometimes get involved in these matters. What usually triggers, that level of attention?
Usually, I've seen their involvement the most on white collar stuff when it involves a financial institution, wire fraud, or there is money laundering or wire fraud as it relates to, they call it narco terrorism, but drugs. Okay, so there's so many times in a federal drug case that there is an associated wire fraud or money laundering charge along with it that it occurs because so many of these transactions occur via Cash App, Venmo, or even the communications related to them occur via those apps. And then all of a sudden that pulls in that kind of focus. I've also had cases where there's been significant amount of bank fraud or wire fraud involving, again, financial institution. They're going to call the FBI. They're going to call the feds.
Right.
They are a federal institution. And the reason why they get pulled in is because these are national companies. These transactions typically cross state lines. And so that's the federal hook involved with that. And it affects commerce. And so that's the other big hook. And when it affects commerce, it impacts the Commerce Clause, and that's how you even get to federal crime in the first place.
So, Dylan, people are often, surprised by how quickly loss amounts or financial calculations can escalate the seriousness of a charge. How do those, numbers influence potential penalties?
Yeah, so it's easy. It's a direct correlation. You increase the amount of potential restitution, you're increasing the potential punishment. So, like for instance, state embezzlement charges below 100,000. They're a lower level felony. You get above 100,000 on an embezzlement case, all of a sudden it becomes a Class C felony, and you're looking at guaranteed prison time. Guaranteed.
Wow.
There's even at a level 1, and most people that are involved in an embezzlement or fraud case that you see are a lot of times they've never had anything on the record. Or it goes the other way. They have a lot of stuff on their record, but all the stuff on their record is embezzlement, fraud, obtaining property by false pretenses. It's all the same stuff. So you either have the individual that does a lot of this, or you have the individual that this is a one-off thing and they get caught, and then it's probably the end of it because they've learned their lesson. Whether that is a guilt or innocence thing, they've usually done something financially not correct or not smart to get in a situation in the first place for it to be a question. And so that's where you have issues. So I can't reinforce good accounting practices enough and keeping track of your money as well. But as it relates to punishment, for sure, you increase the amount of potential loss or restitution, then guaranteed prison time very much becomes on the table. And those charges can stack easily. You get loss amounts well above 100,000, then all of a sudden you can get multiple felonies that can stack. And that is okay to charge. We've said that that's an okay thing to do in the state of North Carolina. And then the way the feds look at it, it's all sentencing guideline based. So those loss amounts are on a grid, and it correlates to a certain offense level score that you have with federal sentencing, and that's a whole other separate thing.
Interviews and statements play a significant role in the white collar cases as well. What should someone know about how those conversations are documented and later used against them?
The main thing is that anything you say can and will be used against you. And I have seen more often than not, I would say that white collar cases and sex crime cases that I handle, more often than not, people get approached to go and talk. And they don't call an attorney, and they should, because it is a very strategic thing to sit down with a detective. Sometimes it's clear that you should. You could clear this up easily or provide information to clear it up easily. A lot of times, though, it's not smart. And people go into those meetings and they think that they're just going to explain it away. And then they say one little thing because a detective acts like your friend, and they're not. They're there to investigate and do their job. And all of a sudden, it actually helps the investigation, it furthers it. And maybe they were stalled out, and that was the reason why they called you in the first place. And then all of a sudden, you've given them a little nugget to continue it on, and then this thing starts to spiral. And then a lot of times that's when I get called and I'm like, well, I'll try to pick up the pieces now, but we'll see what comes of that.
These cases can, intersect with professional licensing, employment contracts, and corporate policies. What kind of collateral issues tend to arise once allegations become public knowledge?
So you're exactly right. The insurance fraud stuff, I've seen that play out where, you have private individuals that, seek more compensation from an insurance company or try to double claim or something like that. And that's how that occurs. But you also have it from the fact that you have insurance agents that deal with money in like different like trust or escrow style accounts. Same for lawyers. Lawyers have trust accounts. And one of the easiest ways to get disbarred, one of the easiest ways to lose your insurance agency license is to dip into that money that's not yours. I've seen that play out in all those different scenarios. And that is like one of the biggest no-nos. There's almost instant loss of licensure. That's a major collateral consequence for sure. Other ones, I mean, just kind of lower, just the embarrassment. I mean, I've seen that, like the way it plays out in the community, smaller communities in particular, gets keyed in on. I've seen people's lives just get upended because of these allegations, and how it affects different community organizations. Because you start hitting at people's money, and man, people, they care.
Yeah.
So that's another one. And then loss of employment is a biggie. And then the bad thing is you lose employment and you've got a pending felony charge. It's a whole lot harder to get a job. So it can start to snowball quite a bit. But those are the major ones.
And before we close things out, when someone learns that their employer or bank or federal agents are asking questions about like financial irregularity, what steps can help stabilize the situation before it becomes more complicated?
Call an attorney, please. Just call an attorney. I mean, to just go through it, to figure out maybe, try to discern what's being keyed in on. Is there a way to explain it? Is it worth sitting down and talking to someone? Is it worth providing information? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it really isn't. Sometimes it is your best interest to just be quiet. And that's the best advice you could get. But that's not every case. Sometimes it's really important to be cooperative and to help explain what's going on, or to help explain maybe some sort of situation surrounding, the allegation, to try to say, hey, there's more going on here than what's being thrown off on me. And that can certainly help clear things up, or at least cast enough doubt for charges to be brought in the first place. But the main thing is to consult with an attorney. It's too much of a minefield to navigate by yourself, especially if you've never done it before.
Well, Mr. Greenwood, sir, appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
All right. That's it for today's episode of For the Record with Greenwood Law. If you'd like to learn more about attorney Dylan Greenwood and his work at Greenwood Law, visit dwg-law.com. You'll find helpful resources about criminal defense in North Carolina, from state charges to federal cases as well. Thanks for listening, and remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review if you found today's episode helpful. Thank you so much, and we will see you all next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.